of Orville and Wilbur Wright, the recognized pioneers of aviation. But there is another chapter to aviation pioneering, one that set forth many aviation firsts and changed the landscape of flight. This man thrust aviation toward what we have accomplished as a nation, both in air power and in space exploration. This chapter is the Bell Aircraft Corporation, and the man was Lawrence Dale Bell. Lawrence, or better known to friends as Larry, was born April 5th, 1894, in Mentone, Indiana, to Isaac and Harriet Sarber Bell. Larry was the youngest of 10 children. Isaac and Harriet moved from Knox County, Ohio, to Mentone, Indiana, and operated a sawmill. Harriet was a school teacher. Harriet encouraged her children to move away from Mentone to a place where there was more opportunity. By 1907, all their children had moved to California except for Larry. Isaac and Harriet decided to sell their lumber business and retire to California so they could be near their children. Larry was excited about the move because he would be close to his brother Grover. He was also eager to see for himself the wonders of aviation he had heard about. In 1910, Larry and Grover attended the nation's first air show, which was held at Dominguez Field near Long Beach. These were the first airplanes Larry had ever seen, and he was thrilled by speeds of 50 miles per hour. After the show, Larry and Grover began to build model planes resembling those at the air show. This is the Bell Boys' first model airplane. Even though this was only a model, it flew and changed their lives. The curiosity and love for aviation led to Grover being hired by Martin Aircraft, followed shortly by Larry. As an exhibition pilot, Grover knew the dangers of aviation. This is one of the last pictures taken of Grover Bell before his fatal crash while routinely scouting for a landing zone on July 4th, 1913. Grover's death was very difficult for Larry, and he didn't think he could continue to work in aviation. Through the encouragement of friends, Larry continued his aviation interest. Larry continued to work for Martin Aircraft as a grease monkey, earning $9 per week. Larry quickly advanced from stockman, where he designed the new Martin logo, to shop foreman, and at the age of 20, he was promoted to shop superintendent. Ultimately, Larry would hold the position of general manager. Not receiving the promised share of ownership in the Martin Company prompted Larry to resign his position in 1925. His drive, spirit, and reputation for high standards preceded him, and he was offered a job with Consolidated Aircraft. Consolidated Aircraft was building the PY-1 amphibious aircraft known as the Flying Boat. These were the first all-metal airplanes. Larry was soon promoted to vice president and then to president. Consolidated Aircraft moved from California to Cleveland, Ohio, to Buffalo, New York, then back to California, where the weather was more favorable for test flying. Larry liked Buffalo, and he found that several very qualified men liked it too, and were willing to join him if he would start a company. Relying primarily on his personal integrity, Mr. Bell raised money from Buffalo business people and area financial institutions. In 1935, Bell Aircraft Corporation was launched. Subcontract work came from his associates at Consolidated and other aircraft manufacturers. This was enough to keep the new venture in business. When the Army Air Corps requested a new interceptor aircraft, the creative talents of the Bell engineering team were assembled. They won the design contract with a new concept for this type of a plane: a twin-engine, pusher-type configuration with two 37mm cannons to deliver a knockout punch against intruding bombers. 14 of these Aerocudas were produced to prove the design concept, and they established Bell Aircraft as the can-do company. In 1937, Bell won the design bid for the first modern fighter airplane, The XP-39 went into production, and Bell Aircraft was established as a major participant in the aviation industry. This was a midship-mounted engine, and through a hollow shaft in the center of the propeller spinner, a 37mm cannon was mounted. Up to 6 50-caliber machine guns, plus 2 to 4 30-caliber machine guns, were standard armament. This airplane had cockpit doors and tricycle landing gear for improved on-the-ground handling. The XP-39 prototype exceeded 400 miles per hour in level flight and set a record that stood for several years. The mission for the airplane was changed, and what resulted was a low-level flyer with a lot of firepower against ground targets. The Bell Corporation was doing quite well manufacturing military orders for Airacuda models 3 and 4. In 1940, production of the Airacuda stopped, and the P-39 Airacobra began rolling off the assembly line. 10,000 of the P-39s were built, with over half of them flown to Russia under a Lend-Lease plan established to better the Allied air forces. Many of the Russian aces had most of their kills while flying the P-39 Airacobra. The P-39 was a very maneuverable aircraft, and in Buffalo, the test pilots would sometimes let off steam by flying under the Niagara Bridge. This brought on howls of protest from officials, and if they were high-ranking enough, Larry would be forced to lay down the law. Mr. Bell did not like to do this because he knew the personality of the test pilots. Larry was not a pilot himself, but had great admiration for these men, and they often brought back memories of his brother Grover. The use of the 37mm cannon prompted the engineers to develop a shock-absorbing gun mount to handle it. This led to a division of the corporation that manufactured most of the gun mounts used in American and English bombers. This factory was set up in Burlington, Vermont, to help free up the labor market around Buffalo. The Bell Corporation continued to develop new aircraft and provide the needed airplanes for the Americans and some of the Allies. At the height of wartime production, employment at Bell Corporation soared to more than 68,000. During the 40s, Lawrence met a young man that had an idea for the control system of a helicopter. Larry secured for him an engineering team, manpower, and a plant to produce the prototype. On December 24th, 1942, a helicopter lifted off the ground. By the time it received the first commercial certification, it had already proved its functional use by saving 2 fishermen in a remote snowed-in area around Lake Erie. When the Korean War broke out, the military purchased 500 of Bell's newest helicopters. They had skids instead of wheels and a more powerful engine. By adding a place for 2 medical cots and face covers, wounded men were flown back to MASH units for emergency treatment of their wounds. Bell helicopters were credited with saving thousands of lives during the conflict. Larry Bell, the Bell Corporation, and its associates were making aviation history at every level. But there is one event that stands above the rest. That is the day the B-29 took Captain Charles Yeager and the XS-1 to 20,000 feet and cut her loose. Yeager glided away from the bomber and fired the rocket chambers. The plane soared to 40,000 feet, leveled off, and went through the sound barrier at Mach 1. Captain Charles Yeager was the first supersonic man, and the Bell XS-1 was the first supersonic plane. Larry Bell, Captain Yeager, and John Stack were awarded the Collier Trophy for their roles in the XS-1 program. Throughout his career as an aviation giant, Lawrence Bell would receive countless awards for his leadership, milestones, and concern for people. These came from many different organizations in the military and civilian sectors. Rightfully, he would take his place in the Aviation Hall of Fame in 1977. Mr. Bell was more than an aviation leader. He was a humanitarian as well. A testament to this are the many hospital wings, libraries, schools, parks, and endowments named in his honor. He never forgot Mentone and would visit when he was in the area. In 1955, Larry returned to his hometown to dedicate a new library for the Mentone School, which was a gift from the Bell Foundation. 1 year later, Mr. Bell would fall victim to a heart attack and die October 1956. Few towns have had the opportunity to honor a son as Mentone has had with Lawrence D. Bell. Throughout his life, he collected memorabilia which tells the story of aviation. From the nation's first air show in 1910 to the latest guided missiles at the time of his death, these priceless memories that tell the story were given in good faith to the town of his birth, Mentone, Indiana. He had hoped that future generations of youthful inventors will be inspired to dream just as he did. Show me a man who cannot bother to do little things, and I'll show you a man who cannot be trusted to do big things. Lawrence D. Bell.